talk to you about cadences. A cadence is a series of two chords that occurs at the end of a phrase. Sometimes a phrase is essentially a coherent section of music, and so sometimes these cadences can occur at the end of pieces of music, but they often occur periodically throughout music, as we have many phrases that can be a part of the construction of a larger piece of music. Think, for example, of a hymn tune, where you might have 3 or 4 phrases of music in the entire hymn. And each of those phrases is going to end with a cadence in and of itself. Some cadences sound more final, more like you are coming to an end and that things are finished. Others sound more open, like there is still more to come. In fact, in one case, there's a cadence that leads you to believe you're going to have a final cadence and things are going to be finished, but it purposefully sidesteps into being something that is not finished. It kind of shocks you all of a sudden. Oh, I was expecting it to be final and finished, and in fact now I realize that that's not the case, and there's got to be more music still to come. So cadences can be used to communicate, in a sense, for the composer to communicate a sense of where they are at, where you are at in the music. Are you at a point where there is a rest, where there is a finality, or are you in a part of the music where there needs to be more, where there's more yet to be said? So what are these different types of cadence that you can come across? Well, there are 4 basic cadences. But before we get into the names of the 4 basic cadences, let's just take a look at one cadence in particular. Sometimes cadences are marked with a fermata. That is not always the case, but occasionally in hymn writing and chorale writing, you will see the ends of the phrases have a little fermata above them, which just indicates that there's a cadence. A cadence usually involves, as I said, 2 chords. In this case, it's a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. And so you have a 2 chord package. For this cadence to be named, you have to take into account not just the 1 chord, but the 5 chord going to the 1 chord. Occasionally you can have cadences that might involve even more than 2 chords. We'll look at that specifically when we look at inversions, and we look at some specific cadences that involve inversions of chords that lead to root position chords. So we'll look at that more specifically when we cover that information. But this is, in essence, what a cadence might look like. It's good voice leading, everything's moving how you would expect it to, but there is a clear sense of moving from one chord to another, and there is a sense that this is a stopping point in the music. Whether or not it be a final stopping point, it's still a point at which the music takes a momentary pause before either proceeding or indeed being finished. So let's look at the different types of cadence that we might have, and I've written them up for you over here. The first type of cadence is the authentic cadence. This is where you have a dominant movement to a tonic movement, 5 to 1. Of course, 7 can sometimes replace 5, so you can have 7 to 1, and it still be an authentic cadence. The strength of the authentic cadence often depends on where it's placed in the piece of music, what happens immediately after it, and sometimes it even depends on exactly which chords are involved. A 7 to 1 would probably be weaker than, say, a 5 to 1. If you add the 7 to this 5-7, so you have a 5-7 chord, a dominant 7 chord to 1, that becomes even stronger again. So the relative strength of the cadence is often dependent on the context and the specific chords involved. Now let's look at the next cadence, which is a half cadence. This is a cadence that really leaves you, unlike the authentic. The authentic is really a final cadence. It's very solid. Even if there's more music, you still feel like you've come to a resting point in the music, very stable resting point on an authentic cadence. The half cadence is the complete opposite. It leaves you really open, really feeling like there should be more. And this is when you move from 1 to 5, or honestly when you move from anything, any chord, to 5. If the cadence occurs where there is a 5 chord, then you have a sense that there should be more to come. So moving to 5 creates the sense of a half cadence. Then the third type of cadence is the plagal cadence, or amen cadence. This is where you have 4 to 1. It's called the amen cadence because it is often associated with the amen at the end of a hymn. The hymn itself comes to a conclusion, you have the final chord, often that's an authentic cadence, a nice strong final cadence, and then you just tack on the end a 4-1 plagal cadence. So it's become known as the Amen cadence, officially the plagal cadence. Now, again, some of you may remember that the 2 chord can substitute for the 4 chord. You can sometimes have a 2-to-1 cadence, which is creating a kind of a plagal cadence because the 2 is acting like the 4 chord. So 4-to-1 is by far and away most common for the plagal cadence, but again, you can have substitutes in there. And the final one is 5-to-6. Again, other things can move to 6, but the most common occurrence is 5-to-6, and this creates the deceptive cadence. This is the cadence that leads you to believe that it is going to 1, and then suddenly sidesteps to the 6 chord, and just kind of gives you a little jolt, you know, whoa, I was not expecting that. And then, usually immediately after this, the music quickly turns around and comes to an authentic cadence to actually end. These cadences, this is what I'm really presenting to you now, is theoretically what these cadences are. What you really need to do is play these cadences and feel them, and then you will get a sense for what they feel like. Also, start to observe cadences in music. Any type of music, honestly, but particularly music from the common practice era. You will notice that it is constructed often of distinct chunks of music, distinct blocks of music that could be called a phrase, that end with a cadence. And that flow of a section of music, a coherent statement that ends with a cadence, is an important construction element in common practice music, honestly in any music, but particularly in common practice music. So be aware of that as you're listening to music, and kind of become aware of cadences. Furthermore, as you are writing your own chord progressions, be thinking about where you are putting in cadences and what cadences you are choosing and how you are ending your progressions. Your progressions of 4, 5, 6, 7 chords should end with a recognizable cadence, and you should voice lead those carefully to make sure that it's very clear that indeed you have ended with a cadence. So you've created a coherent statement of music which ends with a cadence, creating a solid formal unit. Thanks.